Alright guys, we have the latest update in the game now. So we have both the new UR character Kuroo, which a lot of people were expecting anyway, and then obviously also three other SSR characters as part of the select recruit. So we have Kenma, Tendo, and also Goshiki. Now, a lot of you may be wondering who should I actually select for this select recruit, or should I even be going for any of them? And likewise, should I be summoning for this UR character? And I'll be here to share my thoughts. Now, obviously, this is a gacha game, so there's nothing wrong with just picking your favorite character, right? Just enjoy the game, play the game however you want. What I'm going to talk about is more objective analysis of the strengths of the characters. However, if you do have a favorite, right, if you just really like Nekoma team from the series, then absolutely go for it. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So let's start off with the UR because I know that's probably the biggest consideration for people. Now, you guys can read his kit yourself, so I'm not going to go through his entire kit. But at a high overview, basically he has very strong quick spike, which actually gets stronger every single time when you spike because he actually get that buff. And also at the same time, he has very strong block. And also if you actually, depending on how far you dupe him, if you actually dupe him to dupe 2, you'll be able to spam his quick spike like the whole time. And then if you actually get him to dupe 6, whenever he block, he can apply a debuff. So that's almost like a permanent debuff. So it's kind of great, both offensively and also defensively. In case you guys are wondering, right, would this be in competition with other future UR mid blockers, etc.? The next UR mid blocker we're going to get is going to be Hirogami, who is going to be at least 5 or 6 UR characters down the line. So that basically means that if you do actually pick up Kuroo, he will be the best mid blocker in the game for a very, very long time, okay? So if Kuroo is so good, does that mean everyone should be getting him? Not really. There are actually two other things you should also be considering. Number one is that who are you going to actually sub out as your liberal at the back? Because vast majority of the time, most of the win spark in this game, so for example, Wazuyumi, Tanaka, Asahi, they all have receiving skill. So they are still useful even when they're at the back. However, mid blockers, they don't have any receiving skill. At least as of now, I don't think any of the mid blocker have receiving skill. And you can't block from the back either. So vast majority of the time, what you're going to do is that you'll be choosing your liberal sub option as the one subbing out the back row mid blocker. And because everyone already got Suki on day 7 from the beginning event, if I get Crow now as well, what's going to end up happening is that I will be limiting the playtime of one of those two mid blocker, right? Either Kuroo or Suki. Now, eventually, they will still be rotated around, right? Your back row mid blocker will eventually rotate to the front, and then he will actually see some playtime when the other mid blocker, your original starting mid blocker at the front, will then be subbed out by your liberal instead. So he will still see some playtime, but that playtime is limited. And that's kind of why, as a general rule of thumb, this is not anything to do against Kuroo himself, okay? It's just against the second mid blocker position. I just don't find the incremental value of a second mid blocker as high as any of the other position on the team. So that's kind of why if you don't have limited resource, right? If you're free to play, if you consider all of the future UR character, you can consider pulling as well. The value of that mid blocker is not going to be ranked as highly as loads of the other UR in different positions. So that's going to be the first thing you have to make in mind. Then the second thing is more talking about Kuroo's kit. He is a very complete character. If you actually take a look at his kit, you can see he has two skills which buff his offensive quick spy, and then 2 skills buff his block, which basically means that he can actually be used for loads of different things in the map. Especially if you actually get him to like dupe 2 or dupe 6, you are able to then spam his quick attack all the time, and also whenever you do a block, you're able to apply debuff. So you almost want him to do everything. However, he only has limited stamina, right? So you won't be actually able to use him for everything because eventually he will run out of stamina and then he will be subbed out. Now, depending on who is your backup option for that mid blocker, that may be okay. It may not be the worst case scenario, but that is something you do have to consider if you do actually summon for Kuroo. You need to keep in mind exactly what you'll be doing. And this problem will actually get rectified in future when you actually get other characters who are actually capable of sharing that burden. Because right now, for example, vast majority of the time, you would want your mid blocker to do the block because they are the only character. Unless you play data, mid blockers are the only characters or the only position who are actually capable of blocking. However, in the future, you're going to get other wind spikers such as Hoshiyumi, who are actually also able to block, and therefore you no longer need to use your mid blocker such as Kuroo to do all the blocking for your team, and then that frees him up into then doing other half of his kit where he can then do his quick spikes and go for that quick attacking team as well. So that's kind of why I do feel like there is value for Kuroo in the long term when other stronger characters are there to actually share the burden, so he doesn't need to do both of the attacks and also the defense. However, at this point in time, because we don't have access to all those other characters, the main role you want your Crow to do is going to be more on the defensive side, more on the blocking. And then if we actually ignore the offense side of Crow altogether, then Crow doesn't really shine that much in comparison to other SSR mid blockers anymore, because kind of one of the main selling point for Kuroo is the fact that he's so good both offensively and defensively. So if we are only able to use half of his kit right now because we need to keep in mind of the stamina rotation and stuff, then we won't actually be able to utilize his whole kit. Now, I gave you guys both a pro and also the con for UR Chrome, so it's up to you to actually make that decision yourself. However, even in the event that you don't actually want Crow anyway, you should still pull for 50 times just to get those 7 tickets back. And that's actually going to be very important in order to actually make sure you can get at least one UR character every single month. Or potentially, if you actually want to go for dupes, then you can get 3 copies of the same character in about 2 months' time. As for how to do that, do check out my video that I posted previously. I will link that in the comment section as well. You'll talk about all the different ways you can actually farm gems through either dailies, weeklies, or monthly in this game, and how all of those can actually add up to a free UR character every single month, okay? So do please check that out. So this is going to be for the UR banner. Now let's talk about the select banner. So we have 3 different characters here. Once again, I'm not going to go through all of their kits one by one, otherwise that will be way too long. You guys can read their kit yourself. I'm just going to give a few quick high-level overview about the strengths and also consideration on whether or not to pull for them. So starting off with Kenma, he is going to be the best receiving setter for a very long time until his own SP version come out. So if you do actually want to play a Nekma team or more like receiving team in general, he is a must-have. Now, if you are not planning to play them, because let's say if you already have 2 SSR setters such as Oikawa and Kageyama, who you're okay to rotate around, or maybe the date tag setter, then that's also fine. But just bear in mind, if you do actually want to play Nekma receiving team, then you have to get him. Now, he is actually able to passively increase the stats of all of the receiving players on your team, which is great. So once again, works very well if you actually do play that receiving playstyle. But if that's not your playstyle, then obviously he doesn't really add any extra value, and then you can just skip him altogether. Now, he does have a bond with a UR Crow as well, and let's be honest, if you're going to summon for UR Crow and you already have him, and possibly you already have left from the SSR selection chats either from this 120 or maybe previously from the beginner event, then you can actually go for a Nekma team. So that's definitely one very viable option. So if you are going for UR Crow, then Kenma is definitely someone you can consider. Then the next 2 characters are going to be the ones from Shiro Tozawa. So starting off with Tendo. So Tendo is going to have a bond with Ushijima. So he's going to pair very, very nicely with him. However, that's a deployment bond, which basically means both of the characters need to actually be on the field in order to actually activate that. Now, other than that, he also has a high chance to actually do a critical block, which is also going to be very nice. And also when he does a critical block, he will reduce his own blocking ultimate down as well. So if you are actually going for that Shiro Tozawa crit-based team, you will actually potentially be able to spam his ultimate block quite a lot as well, and that's what makes him also very, very good. However, he also faces kind of a similar issue as Kuroo in the sense that he is also going to be your second mid blocker outside of Suki. So if you're going for Shiro Tozawa, it doesn't matter, it's still worth it. However, if you're not going for Shiro Tozawa team, the value of Tendo is going to immediately go down, because once again, he will be competing with either Suki or his own playtime is going to be limited because you will be setting out your liberal to sub him up. So that's something you have to bear in mind. And then last one is going to be Goshiki. He is probably the one I would recommend the least out of the 3, because in all honesty, the role he plays is going to be very, very similar to Ushijima, which is the fact that once, so basically his main thing is that when he actually gets to his ultimate state, once you actually have his dupe, resonance skills, etc., he will be able to spam his ultimate attack, which is going to be very strong. Now, Ushijima can also do that if you actually have Ushijima to do. So that's kind of why if you already are playing your Shiratorizawa Zawa team and have Ushijima there to spam off the ultimate, then you don't really need Goshiki to do his ultimate anymore because Ushijima will be taking care of all of the offensive spot. So that's kind of why the value of Goshiki is going to be a lot less if you actually have Ushijima with 2 dupes. Now, if you only have Ushijima 0 dupe, then yes, fine, you can actually consider getting Goshiki, and then you actually play a Shiratorizawa team where you will be spreading your power spikes amongst different members of the team rather than having just one person spamming off the tap. So that's also a viable option. Although in those kind of cases, I'll probably still recommend you guys in long run wait for Ushijima's rerun and actually just get him at higher dupes. And so that's kind of why, as a whole, I do feel like the value of Goshiki is not going to be very high, mainly because he is competing with the Ushijima. And let's say if you don't even have Ushijima, then you probably wouldn't even be playing a Shiratorizawa team in the first place, and then in which case, why would you even want to summon for Goshiki when there are other also very good win spikers such as Tanaka and Watsuyumi as well? So that's kind of why, for me, Goshiki is definitely going to be the last character of choice out of the 3. So quick summary, if you actually need to decide who to pick in terms of your wish list, I would say if you already have Ushijima, go for Tendo as your first choice. If you already are going to summon for your Kuroo, then you can go for Kenma as your first choice instead. But in either case, Goshiki is going to be at the bottom of that list, okay?